Welcome to Consent Conversations with Joyce and Nina. I'm Joyce Short, and I'm the author of Your Consent, The Key to Conquering Sexual Assault, and I'm the founder of the Consent Awareness Network. And my co-host is Nina Lucas, and she's our Chief of Staff for the Consent Awareness Network. So welcome, Nina. Thanks for joining me today.
Good to be here, Joyce.
Thank you. And we have two really special guests with us today. We have two women who literally changed the world when they came forward in regard to Harvey Weinstein. We have Tarale Wulff and Dawn Dunning, who were outstanding witnesses for the prosecution against Weinstein. So welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And today we're going to be showing you the footage from the press conference for the introduction of the groundbreaking bill that was introduced by Assemblymember Rebecca Seawright in order to define consent in the laws of New York. It's bill number A6540. So before we actually roll the footage, I'd like to get just a little more information from our two guests. So Tarle, can you fill us in a little bit about why you think defining consent is so important to you?
Defining consent is important to me because it should have existed all along. I wasn't aware that it wasn't part of our legal system until I met you, Joyce, and you brought it to my attention after I testified. After I testified in a federal crime trial, I realized consent didn't exist in law, and I started conversations with people. A lot of people don't know it doesn't exist and are shocked by it. So it's obvious that, I mean, generationally speaking, there's thousands of us, generations of us who don't realize it doesn't exist, and we think we're being protected by something. And to define it now is going to change the culture, the way we teach our children in the schoolyards, because that's where it begins when they're young, teaching them consent at such a young age for themselves and for each other. So it's literally going to change the mindset, and it's going to change the behavior going forward.
Absolutely. You know, the other thing that's actually going to change is how victims are treated on the stand. Because when the person on the stand is the victim, then they're often torn apart. Just, you know, their character is assaulted by the defense attorney. And really, their character has nothing to do with whether or not they were sexually assaulted. It's whether the person who is trying to get your cooperation is using some form of malice in order to get your cooperation. Because if they do, you're not consenting. Certainly no means no, but yes only means yes if that person hasn't tried to undermine your self-determination over your body. So this business about you know, what the victim wore or where they were or any of the other, or whether even whether they had previous sexual contact with this person is of absolutely no consequence. It's what the offender did that determines whether their behavior constitutes having contact with you as a result of your consenting or not, because they know whether they've used force, fear, or fraud in order to get you to agree. So thank you so much for that. So Dawn, what do you think our viewers can do that would really help get it passed in New York and anywhere for that matter?
Well, I think to start, they could read your book or listen to your TED Talk, just to, you know, get a general background and an overview of everything. And most importantly, I think making calls to the legislators, the local legislators.
Yeah. So thanks very much for that, Dawn, because we actually have information on our webpage that makes it easy for people to call the legislators. Right now, this bill is under the guidance of the Codes Committee, and all 20 of these legislators will make a determination whether this bill gets put on the schedule or not. So it's very, very important for our viewers to make those phone calls, send them emails, let them know how important this bill is to you. And this bill correctly defines consent, not only in sexual assault, but in all laws, because it's been introduced under general use rather than specifically sexual assault, because consent is always consent, regardless of what we're applying it to. So make those phone calls.
Hi, good afternoon on this beautiful sunny day for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I'm pleased to be joined today from many people that you will hear from. We're all wearing masks, freely given, knowledgeable, informed consent. Agreement, consent. Today we will make history in the fight to prevent victims of sexual assault and to ensure that predators can hide no more. I'm Rebecca Seawright, Assembly Member for the Upper East Side and Roosevelt Island and Chair of the New York State Assembly Task Force on Women's Issues. Sexual violence affects millions of people each year in the United States. Many cases, however, go unreported. Victims are often ashamed, embarrassed, or simply afraid. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention estimates more than 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men experience sexual violence involving physical contact during their lifetimes. Compounding the problem in New York and in states around the country, many of these cases go uncharged or unprosecuted. Convictions are rare. Today, I am announcing a giant leap forward in the adjudication of sexual assault cases. I've introduced legislation that defines consent in the context of the state penal law. Adding a new definition, updating the penal code is freely given, knowledgeable, informed agreement as the definition of consent. This legislation conveys the same principles as those used in the model penal code, the Nuremberg Code, and the General Data Protection Regulation. All 3 highly regarded and currently administered codes guide behavior in medical experiments, medical treatment, statutes that pertain to theft, and the protection of cyber privacy on the internet as recognized in international law. States have been slow to adopt definitions for consent with devastating consequences in sexual assault cases. Here is an example. In the Harvey Weinstein sexual assault case, the jurors asked Judge James Burke, "What is the definition of consent?" Judge Burke's legal answer was, "Use your common sense." His response was almost identical to Judge Stephen O'Neill's response several months earlier in Pennsylvania's Bill Cosby trials. Judge O'Neill had responded to the juries in both the first and second trials that is a question that cannot be answered. You are responsible people. You are reasonable. Use your common sense. With no guidance from Judge O'Neill, the initial jury for Cosby's case could not agree on a verdict. The foreperson for the second jury, a cybersecurity expert familiar with the definition of consent in General Data Protection Regulation, explained this definition to fellow jurors who rendered guilty. A proper definition of consent in New York's law will clarify lawful sexual conduct, guide behavior, and make it possible to hold sexual predators accountable. We want New York to be the first to approve this law and lead the way for time with the clarity prevails and justice will no longer be left to chance. I am now pleased to present our distinguished group of advocates and leaders in the fight against sexual assault. Our first speaker is from Roosevelt Island. Joyce Short is in her book, Your Consent, and I'll just hold it up, encourage all of you to read it. She says that consent in our law is a critical key to the solution. She is the founder of the Consent Awareness Network, CAN, a coalition that works with legislators to define consent in penal codes across the United States and around the world. She's a leading expert on consent, romance scams, and sexual assault, rape by fraud, deception, or impersonation. The New York State Assembly honored her as a woman of distinction. She's a licensed real estate broker and the author of Your Consent, The Key to Conquering Sexual Assault, which clearly defines consent. Consent provides the basis for new laws to hold sexual predators accountable. Joyce Short.
So folks, I have my teal on today because today is the very best day of action for Sexual Assault Awareness Month ever. It's the day that we finally recognize that sexual assault has a definition, and that definition never changes no matter what we're consenting to. If we're consenting to our COVID vaccination, or we're consenting to putting our data on the internet, or we're consenting to, or we're using consent to apply to any kind of crime like larceny or theft or sex trafficking or sexual assault, consent is always freely given, knowledgeable, and informed agreement. And because that's what consent is, the words and conduct of a victim can only indicate consent if consent is actually taking place. So if the offender is using some form of malice, such as force, fear, or fraud, and I like to call them the 3 F words that should never take place in sex, the victim, if they're using force or fear, would only be acquiescing. And acquiescing is agreement under duress. If the offender used fraud, then the victim could only be assenting. And assenting is agreement on the face of it. Missouri law, second-degree rape, says assent is not consent when induced by force, duress, or deception. And Texas law says consent is ineffective if induced by force, duress, or deception. But here in New York, we have no guidance for juries in sexual assault cases. And the end result, because what we do instead is we tell the jury what consent is not. So if I were to tell you I'm not a millennial, would that tell you anything about me, what I am, right? If I told you I'm a gray-haired baby boomer, then you'd know a little something about me, wouldn't you? And we need to tell people loud and clear what consent is. By failing to do so, our laws look like this. I'm going to ask you to hold that for 1 second. That's a Swiss cheese umbrella full of legal loopholes. And people like Harvey Weinstein just dive right into those legal loopholes without any accountability and without any justice for their victims. The victims of sexual assault need justice because justice heals. And sexual assault victims need justice just like every victim of every crime. Ruth Bader Ginsburg told us a very valuable lesson when she said, we change nothing until we change our laws. So I want to say a special thanks today to Assemblymember Rebecca Seawright, who is the bravest legislator I know. And I've got to tell you that over the last 10 years that I've been fighting for this legislation, I've talked to a lot of legislators. And Rebecca Seawright is the only one that actually stepped forward in order to fix the terrible deficiency that exists right now in our laws. And while I'm saying thank yous, I want to thank some of the awesome people that have accompanied me on this journey. Number one, my right arm, Nina Lucas, who couldn't be here today, but also Tarle Wulff, where is she? Dawn Dunning, Jessica Mann, Mimi Haley, Andrea Constant, and Cheryl Carmel, the foreperson for the Bill Cosby jury. So folks, I'd like to leave you today with a poem that I wrote for my TEDx talk. And I wrote it with the dream that one day this poem would help get this bill passed. I call it My Consent, and it goes like this. My body's not a token, not a prize. Don't defile me with coercion, force, or lies. My body's not yours to take, it's mine to give. My body's not your entitlement, it's where I live. Don't think consent's a privilege, it's a must. No matter how intensely you feel lust. FGKIA, keep your rape mentality away. FGKIA, please sign it into law today. Freely given, knowledgeable, and informed agreement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joyce, for that beautiful, beautiful words and for that poetry. It's also National Poetry Month, and so we want a copy of that poem to feature. Our next speaker is Tarle Wulff. She is a model and actress known for Man in Progress 2014, To Shop 2016, A Funeral 2017. She testified as a lead witness for the prosecution in the Harvey Weinstein case, and we're very fortunate to have her with us today. Tarle Wulff. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Tarale Wulff, and before I testified in the Harvey Weinstein trial, I didn't know there wasn't a true definition of consent in our laws, not unlike most people and even some people employed by our legal system. During the trial, as you heard, the jury inquired as to the court's definition of consent. In his final statement, Weinstein claimed to be confused and that he thought most men are confused. Both the jury and the perpetrator expressed confusion. By clearly defining consent, there will be no more confusion. There's a generation of woke individuals who won't be silenced. The revolutionary energy has always been there, it grows and it's contagious, and it's bringing volume to voices that were unheard or silenced in the past. Previous generations were shown and expected to accept and adapt in order to survive. But there is volume being taken by the voices that were unheard and silenced in the past. We have seen what laws do and don't do, and that we have the collective power to cause a complete and dramatic change. I am here to support the bill, A6540. By applying consent in general law, this bill makes it clear that the same consent that protects your property protects your body. Every body, every color, every gender, every age. Let us make that clear. Thank you, Assembly Member Rebecca Seawright. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you to the very talented Tarle Wulff. We appreciate your words. Our next speaker is Dawn Dunning. She is a designer and an actress known for Aunt Rose, The Roughest Cut, and Clown. Dunning is one of 4 witnesses who provided supporting evidence in the Harvey Weinstein alleged pattern of behavior as a sex crime offender. We're very fortunate to have her with us today. Thank you.
Hi. When I testified in the Harvey Weinstein trial, Judge Burke, the jury asked Judge Burke to define consent, and he told them to use their best judgment. This is not about rehashing the past, this is about creating social progress for the future. Bill A6540 enables New York State to prosecute sexual offenses consistently, providing equal protection to all, making sexual assault crimes easier to prosecute and report. Laws help to create culture, and Me Too has demonstrated that society will no longer tolerate sexual assault and abuse of power. This bill provides the solution that guides behavior and will hold people accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dawn. Our next speaker, Bird Millican, is a spokesperson for the Cosby Sister Survivors. Millican is a social worker who also participates in animal rights protests, mounted her protests after seeing the steady stream of celebrities escorting Cosby into the courthouse to stand for sexual assault. Millican also advocates for the anti-domestic violence group No More and creates etched glass art. Bird Millican, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Bird Millican, and I'm an activist. And I'm an ally to the women who survived sexual assault by Bill Cosby. I'd like to share my praise and gratitude to the survivors and thrivers who've raised their voices to lead us here on this monumental day. I'd like to thank Assemblymember Rebecca Seawright for recognizing the importance and need for us to have a legal definition of consent. Thank you. The concept of consent was pivotal in the trials against Bill Cosby. He believed if women were ingested any substance offered to them, regardless if he lied about what it was, he had the right to penetrate you. He believed that even though you were passed out, that was just one more way you were giving your consent. Without a legal definition of consent in Pennsylvania, we nearly enabled a serial rapist to remain free of consequences. The statute of limitations on rape and sexual assault prevented the women who had come forward in support of Andrew Constand from having legal recourse against him for their sexual assaults. So these sheroes decided to work together to change the laws in the states of California, Nevada, and Colorado regarding the statute of limitations on rape and sexual assault. And that brings us here today. On behalf of the survivors of Bill Cosby, I'd like to urge, welcome, and even beg survivors and thrivers across all demographics, including Weinstein survivors, domestic abuse survivors, human trafficking survivors, R. Kelly survivors, Epstein, Nasser, Boy Scout, clergy, Scientology, Latter-day Saints, campus rape, and incest survivors, and so many others deserving recognition and our respect. I'd ask that we band together and support Bill A6540. We need to place the blame where it is deserved, on the systems that have enabled and perpetuated the laws that support rape culture. Go online! Go online! And vote yes for consent being defined as freely given, knowledgeable, informed agreement. This is how you can make a difference, regardless of whether you live in New York or not. I ask that you rise up and band together with us. Let's make these legislative changes Bill Cosby's new legacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Bird Millican. We appreciate all that you're doing as an activist. Our next speaker could be Esther Yang. Esther is a sexual assault survivor and the author of a book, Love Yourself, The Heck with Everyone. She is also a psychotherapist, a second-degree black belt in karate, yoga, and she has helped clients lead healthier, happier lives.
Hi everyone, my name is Esther Yang. First and foremost, I want to thank all of you for being here, and also, of course, Assemblymember Rebecca Seawright for being a trailblazer for this. This should have not taken this long because Bill A6540 should be the common sense. Consent should be a common sense. As a creator for bully-free zone in public school, that consent should be also taught from like young age, from 3 years old all the way to now, because the reason why Weinstein and Epstein can survive because of the confusion of consent. So I'm really grateful for Rebecca Seawright, Assemblymember Rebecca Seawright, for doing this, and also for Joyce and Birdie, and for all of us. Like, we should not have a victim. Tara should not be coming here and speak. No victim should be coming here. We should not even have a press conference about this. What common sense should really take place. So I urge all the elected officials to make this bill pass and make it work. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Esther. We appreciate all that you do. I want to just hold up the book I Have a Right To, and we have the parents and sister of Chessy Proud here. And this is a young woman on the Upper East Side who suffered a traumatic, terrible experience. And I want to bring recognition to her case by holding up her book and asking on her mother to say a few words.
This is just in time. We're in a tremendous moment post Me Too. If we had had a consent definition back in 2014, my daughter, who was a freshman, she was 15 years old at St. Paul's School, where her sister went, her father went, where the most educated and elite in our education systems are supposed to go, and they did not respect a common sense definition of consent. Her perpetrator said, "I thought she was having a great time," even though she said no several times. Her life would not have been changed so dramatically had we had this definition of consent. Assemblywoman Seawright, you are just paving the way for a future post-Me Too, and we have been waiting for this moment for decades, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else want to say a few words? All right, Crystal, step right up.
As a survivor of child sexual abuse, I know what it's like to be silenced. Now, having experienced another form of sexual assault as an adult, I've learned now I won't be silenced again. I will be taking up space and I will be speaking. I'm here today because in January I was Googling what happened to me, trying to make sense of what happened to me on my body, and I came across Joy Short's website, consentawareness.net. I emailed her, and here we are. It's because of Joyce I decided to email my senator in New Jersey, Senator Brian P. Stack, and now we're moving forward for New Jersey to pass the same bill that Assemblymember Rebecca Seawright has introduced. I am one of many women who have had enough of saying, seeing, and hearing Me Too, and Me Too, and Me Too. Tired of the legal system not holding accountable predators. It'd be easy to say that the system is broken and that there's no point in trying to rectify it. But our safety, our joy, and our bodies are worth fighting for. We will not stay silent so you can be comfortable. Thank you again to Assembly Members Rebecca Seawright and Joy Short. I'm really excited to have New Jersey be the next state to introduce this bill. Thank you.
And thank you again to Joy Short for bringing us all together. And I see Ellen Pallavi here. Ellen, would you like to say a few words? Ellen has been a tremendous leader and activist and advocate on behalf of Community Board 8.
I am 100% behind this bill. I think it's necessary. And as I stand here, I think of my friend who was on a date rape, and she got pregnant and had to have a termination of pregnancy, and she never forgot it, and she's dead today from suicide. So this is a really important bill. I hope it passes. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you to all our survivors, our advocates and activists, and again to Joy Short, who is leading this national effort. We appreciate your covering the press conference. Thank you all.
If you want your local legislator to climb on board the consent train, then we want to hear from you. You can contact us at info@consentawareness.net. And if you'd like to be here with us, if you'd like to be our guest, also you can give us a call. You can contact us at info@consentawareness.net. So folks, any parting words from our guest today, from Tarale or from Dawn?
I actually have something. I just want to say that I think this bill will really help close a lot of loopholes that currently exist in the law. And that's so important. You know, during our Weinstein trial, during the Cosby trial, this came up. And like Joyce was saying, it really does help put the blame back on the perpetrator instead of the victim. And there's so much victim blaming in these types of cases. So, you know, this is something that can really help with all of that.
Fantastic. Well said. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to mention that for anyone out there who doesn't understand why we need a definition of consent, it's simply because this is a universal law, not just for every body, every gender, every race, every age, but universally consent exists, not just in sexual assault. So as universal law, it protects, the humankind. Yeah.
My body's not a token, my body's not a prize. Don't you dare defile me with question for so lies. My body's not yours to take, it's all mine to give. It's not your entitlement, it's where I live.